Hello, and welcome to Retrospective Cinema, a podcast wherein we'll endeavor week after week to see the full filmographies of chosen directors. We'll interpret, critique, and discuss. I am your co host, Annie Morell.
And I'm your other co-host, Ryan Saylor. This week we have Paul Thomas Anderson's 2014 neo-noir. It's drug-fueled, it's crazy, it's all over the place. It is Inherent Vice. Here's a clip.
I miss those days. I miss you. Nothing was supposed to happen this way, Doc. I'm so sorry.
That was once again from Inherent Vice, but as you may or may not know, if you've listened to some of our previous episodes, we are completionists here at Retrospective Cinema. And before we talk about Inherent Vice, we have to talk about a couple things that Paul Thomas Anderson filmed in between The Master and Inherent Vice. Apparently, I only caught one of them, so Ryan's going to tell me about one of them. But first, we should talk about the music video that he directed, another Fiona Apple joint, Hot Knife.
Yeah, the context here is perhaps more interesting than the video itself. So the other collaborations between Fiona Apple and Paul Thomas Anderson all occurred while they were dating from, I think it's 98 to 2002 or something. I looked it up a couple episodes ago. A lot of those videos leaned into him ostensibly being like, look how pretty my girlfriend is. And that was the video a couple times. Which there was nothing wrong with. But yeah, Fiona Apple would go on to say their relationship was pretty messy. We talked about that briefly on, I think it's the Boogie Nights episode. And their breakup, the year that his relationship with Maya Rudolph starts is 1 year before his relationship with Fiona Apple ends. So I don't assume it was a clean breakup is all I'm getting at. And yet, a number of years later, they got back together to work on this, and there isn't any interview that says what quite led to this. Maybe they were still on good terms in some way. But yeah, this was his first music video since the Punch Drunk Love era. And sure enough, yeah, he filmed one more for Fiona Apple.
Yeah, I felt like this one, I don't have a ton to say about it. I think it's very of the time of the 2010s in that the song is almost completely a cappella. It's like all layered voices of Fiona Apple. It's just Fiona Apple, but it's, a bunch of her vocal tracks layered on top of each other. And I think the one thing I have to say is I did like how well he captures in this one in particular how much of a full body expressive singer Fiona Apple is. I think he does a good job of that, and just the way that she's blocked in a couple of the kind of vignettes that she's in. You really see, like, it seems like she probably is actually singing. I'm not sure that she is in the others. Obviously, the real track is played over that, but it seems very expressive. So, and then just a sign of the times, this kind of a cappella track that she does.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the song itself reminded me. So yes, it's mostly all vocals doing kind of rhythms, honestly. And I think at one point there is a little more instrumentation that comes in, but mostly it's just her and this drum. And the layering actually reminded me of Steve Reich's clapping music, if anything, which was kind of a strange cut. And I don't know if she's heard it or not. Although, she's definitely into art music, so there's obviously a high chance that she has. But that was specifically my touchstone. The video itself, yeah, I don't know. If I hadn't known that this was PTA, nothing about it would have really stayed with me. Although I do think that you're right, that, yeah, it captures more of her person, which is an interesting comparison. It seems like, yeah, like honestly, that he's no longer in love with her while filming this, which is kind of cool just because we have watched everything else.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing he made during this, so with Punch Drunk Love and The Master, he started to take alternate cuts, deleted scenes, and repurpose them into short films. There's a piece called Everything in This Dream that is advertised as that, but it's a little shorter. There's not a whole lot that, paints a brand new picture of our characters or anything. So watching it, I was kind of left confused, and I looked into it, and actually what it is, I guess, yeah, we are a full spoiler podcast, worth saying before I finish this sentence. Although, honestly, Inherent Vice, if you know the whole plot, it's not going to really affect your take on the movie. This one's
Is
not.
it even really possible to spoil this movie? I don't know that it is.
There's so much plot, and yet it just doesn't matter, and we'll talk about that. Anyway, Inherent Vice has this voiceover narration throughout the film that is taken directly from the book, but in the book it's not any specific characters saying it. It's just Thomas Pynchon's writing, and then that's repurposed as the voiceover narration. The screenplay for Inherent Vice was, in its first draft, literally just the book written as a screenplay, and then he whittled it down from there. The ending scene of the movie diverges from the novel, and it's the largest diversion in the entire film. Otherwise, to my understanding, I haven't read the book, but in reading about the book, the film mostly stays 1-to-1 with the book. But in the final scene of the book, Doc is alone, whereas in the movie, he drives off with Shasta. And so the narration from the book doesn't make it into the film, and so he filmed this short film which uses that narration from the end of the novel, just so that, you know, it had been used.
Oh. Huh. That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow. So is he just not, like, he doesn't get back together with Shasta in the book?
To my understanding, in the book they have sex like they do in the film, and then they go their separate ways and don't see each other again, whereas the film, they drive off together, and it's left, you know, a bit open.
Yeah, I definitely just briefly thought that was going to be their character arc or their relationship arc. I was surprised that they were together by the end of the film. It is cute. I mean, I liked the ending. Truly did not remember how this film ended. This is, I do want to say, transitioning into talking about it, I want to point out just that this is the first film that we've watched for this podcast that you and I watched for the first time together of the run.
That is true. Yes, this was a COVID watch, right?
This was a COVID watch, and I didn't remember most of it, but I do remember it feeling as if I were on drugs. And once again, it did feel, which I think is, you know, so intentional, because you have this very, very unreliable narrator in Doc Sportello, played by Joaquin Phoenix. He's big into the dope, and that really makes it impossible to tell what is happening. And then there are like blackout time jump type deals, and it's not nonlinear, but it's somehow like more confusing.
Yeah, well, so it is a neo-noir, but it's almost a neo-noir, because it's taking the noir tropes and then the neo-noir tropes and still subverting them, and just kind of showing that there is no answer to a lot of this and none of it matters, is kind of the conclusion that the story comes to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, the film starts with this mystery where Doc's ex comes in and says, like, oh, I want you to make sure that Mickey's safe. So we kind of think that that's where the film's going to go. And then our next scene, we get set up about tracking down this guy that owes this other guy money, and it's like, okay, well, is that our mystery? And that one resolves very quickly. And then the film's like driving mystery is this whole other thing where Doc is trying to find Shasta, and in the midst of all that, there's these other mysteries that come and go about like what this crime syndicate is, and, you know, who the real criminals are, and all these different things. So there's so many mysteries that the film can feel very overwhelming to the viewer. And on this viewing, I actually kind of locked into the film itself isn't quite as confusing as it felt last time, or did feel at certain times this time. It's simply that because, you know, we never go from point A to point B, and there are like 4 or 5 point A's that we get, yeah, the viewer can be left feeling like, what did I miss? And the truth is probably not anything. It's it's just that the film and the book that it's based on don't care to resolve much of what's going on.
Yeah, that's for sure. No, because I do remember on first watch thinking, oh, will another watch of this clear up the many, many questions that I have and confusions? And the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to your point, like I think that is the whole purpose of the film. It's very nihilistic in a lot of ways, and it's, you know, it's set in the 70s in Gordita Beach, California. I love how much PJ loves Southern California. It's we're in this time where there's kind of two types of people. There are hippies and they're, whatever you want to call them, yuppies or straight-laced people or whatever. And Doc is definitely a hippie, and people call him a dirty hippie all the time. And there's this kind of, I think, nihilism that comes with his brand of hippie, where just because you're in this constant like haze, maybe nothing really matters that's going on, and even when he tries to make sense of it, to figure out things, it often doesn't quite resolve.
Yeah. Well, it's the end of an era, right? He's already from a bygone era, like where, we've transitioned to the Nixon era. We're gonna see kind of the end of free love hippie America, and it's gonna transition to the 70s, which is this time of more conservative politics. We're gonna get paranoia with Watergate right around the corner, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, the people still holding on seem pretty out of place in this world, and I think that is our lead. And he is a good detective, I think. Like, he's a little ditzy and kind of falls into things all the time, but he solves cases.
Yeah, there are a few gotcha moments for him, for sure. Even with, we haven't talked about Bigfoot. Josh Brolin's character plays a detective whose nickname is Bigfoot, and there are a couple of times where he gets him, and even Bigfoot has to say that I think you would be a good cop or something like that. So yeah, he's good at his job. I think he probably would be better if he wasn't smoking like many joints a day, but that's just my opinion. To the point where it alters his reality, which we get pretty immediately with this commercial that he sees on television for Channel View Estates, which, yeah, I don't even know how much we're actually going to talk about, like the finer plot points. There's a wealthy businessman who goes missing, which is kind of the case that he ends up being on, and Channel View Estates is his latest venture. And so it's this ad with Josh Brolin as this stereotypical hippie talking about the place, and then we haven't even met Josh Brolin yet, and then you meet him and realize, like, well, there's no way it's that guy. Although at the same time, and maybe I'm trying to interpret it too much, there are all these mentions, like he shows up multiple times on television, Josh Brolin's character does, and there are all these mentions of acting from him. Is he like also trying to be an actor in LA, or am I? What do you think?
Well, maybe. I see what you're saying. I didn't read past that. That thing didn't happen, because a lot of this film might not happen, right? I actually, right when I finished the film, I was kind of reading some people's thoughts, and I finished this watch before you did, and read online, some people talking about the whole character Sortilege might not be real. So then I tasked you, I gave you I texted you and said, like, oh, can you see if anyone other than Doc ever talks to her in the film? And I'm curious, does anyone other than Doc talk to her?
So even this does not have a clear answer, because the one time that Sortilege is in a scene with someone other than Doc is the Ouija board scene, the kind of flashback memory, which already it's a memory, so I don't trust it, and it's Doc's memory. But it's this like nice day. It's maybe I took it as it's maybe the day that like he and Shasta first connected romantically. Ultimately, we don't see that, but there's mention later on of like, yeah, I just always thought that Sortilege tried to like pair us together in that way, because they go off and try to go to this place because of the Ouija board. But Sortilege is there and is talking to the two of them, but never really to Shasta, and Shasta doesn't directly talk to her. But then, to my point, like, I wish I had a simple answer for you. You gave me a task, because at the end, Doc mentions that it's their final scene together, Doc and Shasta, where he says feels the same way, like it's just us, as the Ouija board. It feels the same way as the Ouija board, how they're feeling in that moment at the end of the film. And he specifically says just us, which to me,
yeah, I'm convinced.
Maybe she says just us, but either way, yeah. I'm convinced too. I probably wouldn't have caught it had you not asked me to look for it, but I do think that Sortilege is just Doc because she's narrating it too. She is the narrator.
Right. Yeah, there's that great scene where he like opens his trunk and sees that he's been set up, and then she just is his thoughts. Like there's no like objectivity. It's just his thoughts right then. So yeah, it's interesting. I think there are like entire plot lines and at least one character that don't even exist in this film. We're meandering a bit, but on brand considering what we're talking about. But anyway, you were talking about Bigfoot and his introduction.
Yeah, we see him in this commercial, and then we see him in real life and realize that he's not a dirty hippie. He is actually a local police officer, I think, or at least like a state police officer, because the feds come in at a certain point. So he's definitely not that level. And he even talks about not being taken seriously. Yeah, he kind of is this foil to Doc. Again, it's this pairing we talked in both The Master and There Will Be Blood. And I think it's a lot less so in this one. But there's this, again, pairing of two men who are kind of two sides of the same coin. Doc being the, private investigator who smokes weed all the time and is kooky but good at his job, and then Bigfoot, who is the straight-laced like family man who I truly don't know if he seems like he's not particularly good at his job and is just like openly corrupt. Like makes a joke about being corrupt at one point.
The one big setup that he does pull off, he somehow trusts Doc to like break out of handcuffs and like kill these two men that Bigfoot needs killed, and like all of that does happen. so I mean, he at least...
But does that speak to Bigfoot's prowess, or does it really just speak to Doc? I guess if he sees that in Doc.
Yeah, it's definitely more on Doc, but just the fact that Bigfoot's like, well, I need this part of the plan to happen, it'll happen. Like he's right,
he'll figure it out. Yeah, he'll have a shard of Shasta's credit card to use to pick the lock of the handcuffs. Which again, like I think this kind of movie can kind of get away with pretty much anything because you don't know what's real.
You referenced the Ouija board, and yeah, at one point they get a phone number just by using that, and that's like the only time it comes up. Although there are other references to horror in this film, so maybe it's more of a through line than I noted. I actually wrote down, I was curious if you made anything of it, because we get, there's a character named Wolfman. There is this Ouija board. One person's killed by like a bite on their neck. So like there's all these horror references. I don't know. I don't have anything. Do you have anything for why it's all here?
Not necessarily. And I think you maybe got a little bit further on that kind of thought process than I did. But yeah, you have like the Golden Fang as well, and someone is killed by two golden fangs, is what they say. Martin Short is killed by two golden fangs. Sad.
Who kills it here? There's a lot of actors in this film that have, they're not typical castings. Like Owen Wilson's here, Benicio del Toro's here, and all kind of just doing small things. And yeah, the one that shines the most to me was Martin Short.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I adore him as a performer. I think he can be such a like sprightly presence, perfectly cast, and yeah, really makes an impact because he really just has a single kind of extended, well, you could argue it's two scenes because it's like the office scene and then the police car pulling over the foursome who are all just like high on multiple drugs. Yeah, he's great. And you're right. Oh my gosh. The amount of people that I forgot or didn't realize on the first watch were in this movie was just excessive. Hong Chow, did not remember her being in it, but I love her. And I think she has a fun little part as one of the ladies at Chick Planet Massage. Gina Malone is in this, like the guy who plays Jonah in Veep, one of the like FBI agents. It's really, it's at a point in a director's career where like actors just want to be
right
in a PTA movie, and you start to get this kind of cast. And of course, Maya Rudolph is also a small role in it. Cute.
Yeah, at this point they'd been together already, what, like 13 years, and so he's like, all right, you can be a desk worker.
This is a sure enough thing that I can have you in my movie and not regret it later on. Yeah, and I'm sure too, like they have such different career trajectories that, yeah, I'm not surprised that it took that long, to be honest. But going back to the horror just briefly, I'm not sure. Yeah, and even Bigfoot, the name Bigfoot is like having kind of cryptid imagery is something. but I'm not sure its purpose. I do think also on the subject of genre that finally, after a couple movies, we've returned to having at least some comedy in his work.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
No, there's some laugh out loud stuff in this movie.
yeah, I think my favorite comedic moment in the whole movie is when Gina Malone plays a recovering heroin addict who had a baby while she was still using heroin, and she's asking Doc for help, as a lot of people do in this movie, but she at one point shows a picture of like what her child looked like when they were just born, and Doc just immediately gives this like high pitched scream and then like composes himself. It's just such a good comedic moment. Yeah. And then, all the a lot of Bigfoot, I think, has tinges of comedy, both him in the commercials and I'm assuming you clocked all the phallic imagery with Bigfoot.
Yeah, well,
Oh, the man loves a chocolate covered banana as a snack. I'll just say that.
Because we watched There Will Be Blood, The Master, this, back to back to back, I was locked into the two men, and exploring their characters and the themes of the film through their relationship. And I think that is done again here, perhaps not as much as the other films. We don't get, Eli telling Daniel they're brothers, metaphorically, but we do have their lines sync up at the end of the film, and
Cute.
they realize, like, huh,
we're not so different, you and I, kind of moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, especially with The Master having just happened, I wondered if there was some homoeroticism with all of the phallic imagery, and especially because we see like he seems unsatisfied at home, and his family kind of seems to hate him. So I wondered if he's living a lie in that way.
Yeah, to me it feels one-sided in this case. I think in previous cases that we've discussed, it's been more of a back and forth, but I really didn't get any bites from Doc on that. But definitely, I mean, the first scene that we really have with Josh Brolin's character with Bigfoot is he's trying to needle Doc by talking about his ex, like potentially sleeping with a different man, and the whole time he's like doing this very suggestive gesture with his finger. The classic two-handed sex gesture. The rest of the time, it's just bananas all the time. And at one point, he tells someone like that he'll shove it up their ass, which is just vaguely gay. It's an insult, like it's meant as as an attack.
But I get you.
But yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if he is supposed to be in the closet, if that's canon, as they say. But I don't think. I think Doc feels pretty straight to me.
Yeah, and Doc does feel. I mean, well, he says, "Are you okay, brother?" And then Bigfoot says, "I'm not your brother," and he says, "But you could use a keeper." So I think that sums up how like Doc sees them. But yeah, I felt like there was a non-zero chance that Bigfoot was into Doc.
All of that leads up to, I guess, skipping to the end, because again, it doesn't matter for this one, because how they sync up, you're talking about how their dialogue syncs up at the end, is Bigfoot asks for a hit off of Doc's joint. And, he spent this whole movie calling him a dirty hippie and a dope fiend and all of that. And he takes a couple hits off of this joint, and then he just starts eating just weed. There's like loose weed on this plate, and he's like eating it with his hands, and then he just picks up the plate, and it's this animalistic display that is freaking out even Doc, who's at this point, at the end of the film, seen such crazy things. And to me, I just took that as, yeah, this man is stifled in so many ways. His home life is clearly very stifling, his job, and you give him, it's that thing where it's like you just like tap a little crack in there and it's just fully broken, which is, I think, what that is supposed to mean. But I'd love to know if you have a different interpretation of that very bizarre end moment with Bigfoot.
Honestly, the first thing it made me think in reflection when I was kind of thinking back on the film, because I just decided that this other character wasn't even real, I wondered if somehow Bigfoot was also just Doc, like imagining what he'd be like out there with their lines lining up. And also that whole scene's very weird. Like Bigfoot kicks down the door entirely. Like, not kicks open a door. Like, the door is decimated. Like, superhuman strength. And then, yeah, he just downs this whole plate of weed. But I do think Bigfoot is... And I guess that would explain, you know, in all fairness, that would explain how Bigfoot just shows up, like, in that commercial in other parts of the world if he wasn't real. But I do think Bigfoot is real.
Maybe that's that's another point to why he's titled that, is like you're supposed to maybe think that he's not real. But yeah, I do think that he's real.
Yeah. But
I believe in Bigfoot.
There you go. But yeah, I thought it was just Bigfoot kind of trying to admit, well, you did better than me here, so let's have peace. And he's such a strange human that he does these things to find peace, or to display, like, you know, truce with his rival.
Yeah. Oh, what a weird, because that's like pretty much the full end. Like that scene, and then it's the scene with Shasta, and that's the end of the movie. It's crazy.
Right. So we've talked a lot about what the film is not interested in, whether that be, you know, really following the tropes of noir or neo-noir. And I guess all a neo-noir is usually just a noir taking place in modern time or being made in modern time. But usually neo-noirs, you know, I'm thinking about like Chinatown or Big Lebowski or whatever, used those tropes in a certain way. Like there was kind of a consistency within that genre. So that's what I mean when I'm like, is this even that, you know? But what this film is interested in is kind of exploring the culture wars of that transition to the early 70s and what that felt like for everyone involved. We explore that through these characters of Doc and Bigfoot. The film empathizes with both sides, I'd say.
Yeah.
But it does show that, you know, neither side was a perfect lifestyle. I mean, we see Doc, since the whole film is from his perspective, I mean, we truly see how he meanders and is unfocused as he goes through life. And we also see Bigfoot being susceptible to corruption in a way that Doc is not because of the way he is. So I think that those are both examples of, you know, those lifestyles. And then the other thing that it's interested in, to the point that it changes the end of the novel, like I referred to earlier, is this core relationship that Doc has with his ex, Shasta. PTA described it in an interview. I'm gonna misquote because I didn't write it down, but paraphrasing here, it was something like, you know, it's that feeling of wondering who your ex is with and what they're up to, and then letting that consume you. And I may have given it more negative connotation than he did. But yeah, the drive of the film isn't one of justice necessarily, although that is there. The driving nature of the film is that this man has unresolved feelings for his ex and wants her back. I'm kind of giving you a lot there of what I think the film is actually interested in, but feel free to respond to any or all of it.
Well, I mean, I think I'll start with the kind of culture clash. Yeah, I definitely think that there's not a clear answer of like, this Doc is good and Bigfoot is bad, and we see the ups and downs of each of those ways of living. And I think we see a lot of, you know, I've talked about how much people talk about Doc being a dirty hippie, and yet we see a lot of these people who are viewing themselves as better than Doc, as more civilized, acting in the same way. Like I think Martin Short's character is a great example of that, where he's this degenerate still. He might be rich and successful. He might have a nice suit and a big office, but he's doing coke on his desk, and he's taking off his pants to go have sex with a secretary. You know, he's still living in many ways this like life that revolves around sex and drugs that I think, you know, is the persona of hippies at the time. And just because he dresses it a little differently, it's socially acceptable. I think another great example of that is there's a point where Bigfoot is home again talking on the phone with Doc, and he has a bottle and a glass of whiskey in front of him, and his like toddler son is like sitting on the counter. And you know, Bigfoot's been drinking the whiskey, it's like part of the way down. His son just like apropos of nothing starts filling up the glass for him, which to me suggests this is what daddy does. Like, he drinks a lot in the middle of the day, and, this is normal. Yeah, I loved that little moment. It communicated so much to me, even just being a small silent moment with a kid actor. So yeah, I think we see everyone's kind of degenerate in this.
Yeah. I mean, on the macrocosm of the film, the Golden Fang is this crime syndicate that's running drugs, but then they're also in dentistry and rehabilitation on the other side, so that they can make money on the quote unquote good side of things. So yeah, the film has a very, and maybe it's the book, but the film certainly keeps it, has a very skeptical outlook of the world and the do-gooders versus the more obviously degenerate people.
Yeah, it's cynical. It's nihilistic at times, I think. And then kind of addressing your point about Shasta and Doc's relationship kind of being the other main thing that this is about, and Doc's kind of unresolved feelings for Shasta, his ex. Absolutely, I totally see that, and I think to me the message is pretty clear. Like, yeah, it's nothing but trouble if you if you try to hit up an ex. But maybe it'll work out. I guess. I guess it does that complicates it. The ending being changed does complicate that messaging quite a bit. I mean, I guess if you're willing to go through all the trouble that it will bring, then potentially it could pay off.
The final shot almost reminded me of the Graduate. The final shot of that, where our characters here aren't totally doomed. They're not set up well, and they've committed to this new life.
Yeah. Well, and they do say, we're not back together again. It's kind of a cheeky reference to something. Well, I think Shasta says it earlier in the film, and then Doc says it at the end, that we're not together. Ha ha ha. But it's pretty clear that they're going to be something. But yeah, I don't think it's an assured, like, it's not like they got married at the end. It's not a classic, like, Shakespearean comedy ending where everybody gets married. It's a pretty realistic, like, yeah, I guess they're back in each other's lives, and it cost a lot, and it might cost more, because who knows where things will take them after this. Like, it's not a clean ending of some of the conflicts within the film. So yeah, probably more trouble is potentially coming for one or both of them. Do also get a more traditional happy ending kind of reunion
for Coy.
Yeah, for Coy, for Owen Wilson's character, which we really haven't talked about him, but he's the father of Gina Malone's child, who used to look scary. and they get reunited at the end. And it's this, very traditional happy ending for the two of them, for the three of them, for their child as well, to have both their parents back.
You know what I really like about the ending, about him, trying to get back with his ex, and the viewer probably knowing that that's, not going to work out. The film, like we've alluded to, is also this microcosm for America at the time. And I think, if this is this culture war of viewpoints and what America is going to look like in the 70s, then I think that ending suggests, that also his way of life, like if America is to get back with its ex, so to speak, like this, the progressiveness of the 60s, or to try, which people were trying, it's not going to work out. And we know it didn't, because, the film's made 40, 50 years later, and we've seen where the world went since then. I think it also points to, Doc's continued desire to latch on to a bygone era, and how we, the viewers, know that at some point he's going to have to move on, because the world's never going back. His paranoia, drug fueled as it is, only small potatoes compared to the paranoia that the nation's about to feel from the Nixon era. All of these concerns he has about the world are only going to get worse, and his way of life is less and less sustainable. So I thought the film was emphasizing that a bit with this idea that at the end he would try to get back with his ex.
Yeah, and even just his treatment of drugs in this in general is that's a huge part of his lifestyle, and they make a point at one part of the movie of saying that, he's kind of stuck to the less hard stuff for the most part, that he's kind of still doing okay, whereas, Gina Malone's character has whole new set of teeth because of her heroin addiction, and we see the kind of recovery center that is being run by the syndicate and all these people who clearly, needed major help. Yeah, that it's just it's not a sustainable lifestyle, and yet Doc is trying so desperately to keep sustaining it
Right.
despite what the rest of the world is kind of communicating to him. I did want to talk about on the subject of how Shasta and Doc's relationship ends up. There's a scene that I think we may have briefly referenced with Doc and Shasta where Shasta opens up about the true nature of her relationship with Wolfman.
Yeah.
I do like that some people say
Yeah.
Wolfman.
Fascinating scene.
The one that I think is going to stick with me the most on this watch, because prior to this scene, it to me sounded like it was a pretty legitimate, maybe polyamorous relationship with Shasta and Wolfman. Wolfman has a wife, and we see her, and then we also learn that their housekeeper is also involved in sexy times around the house, clearly. But Shasta starts to open up to Doc, and you find out that actually she's just essentially
Yeah, she's being trafficked.
she's being trafficked. Yeah. And yeah, I mean it's so sad, and yet this whole scene she is also kind of trying to seduce Doc while telling him this very sad reality that she's been living in.
Right.
Yeah, it's this confusing mix of she is very very much seducing him physically, and also maybe wanting some sort of release from that, because it kind of ends with her kind of presenting her butt to him and being like, yeah, if someone did that to me, like I would want to, I know what I would want to do. I would want to like really give it to them. And he starts like spanking her, and then that initiates the sex. But
Mm-hmm.
I think there's this kind of punishment that she is seeking because she just feels ashamed for getting put in that position. And yeah, it's such a sad scene. I'm wondering if you had any further thoughts about it.
I may have read it slightly, or like the culminating element of the scene. I want to be clear. Obviously her story is horrible, but I may have read the culmination slightly more optimistic. I kind of interpreted it not as wanting punishment, but trying to, or to me it was her trying to initiate sex, like for the first time of her own accord in a very long time. Like if this is someone who's been in victimhood for so long, like that, she finally has someone that she knows is truly into her, for better or worse with how their relationship ended up before, and that she can seduce, and that she's going to do that to kind of reclaim her power in sex.
Yeah, and I guess she does have the power through that entire sequence, even when she's in a vulnerable like physical state. Like
Sure.
she is choosing to do that. I like that. I prefer that interpretation. My bleak one. And I think probably it's a mix of all of it, because it's as so much of the movie is a mix of these conflicting feelings and realities. And yeah, definitely my favorite scene of the movie.
Yeah, it's so complicated. And yeah, it's one long take, which obviously we've talked about long takes a lot in PTA's films, but this one's not so much camera acrobatics or anything. The camera's mostly just sitting there. It's mostly just hinging on, can this performer deliver this whole scene, this whole monologue, and yeah, go back and forth between someone so miserable and potentially excited by this scene. And yeah, it's pulled off very impressively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not an easy dynamic to pull off. It could very easily be problematic or just fail outright. Hats off to everyone, especially Catherine Waterston.
I don't know that our description of it could do it justice, but the experience of watching this film, Annie referred to it earlier, like it feels like you're on drugs. There's certainly very intentional choices that are that. The film is very foggy in a way that's like, what if you were party setting or enclosed setting and there's smoke all around you, except like our characters are often outside and it's literal fog, but that's kind of how I read it, that they're just no matter where they go, they're high. And a lot of the whole thing meanders, but a lot of the individual scenes meander in ways like that someone on drugs telling a story might do. Just, this thing happened, and then, oh, let me tell you about this and this and this. And yeah, it's quite an interesting film. By far, at least up to this point, PTA's least accessible. But I think there is a lot here that is quite rewarding, at least much more so than I thought a couple years ago. This thing definitely grew on me.
Yes, I agree. I think as we're wrapping up here, this is still my least favorite of his. Maybe it's so hard to compare this and Hard Eight, but maybe tied around Hard Eight.
I like this more than Hard Eight, but I feel you.
Yeah, they're still great films. Like, both of them are so good. It's this. He set such a high standard in his career.
You know what we have not talked about that we actually absolutely have to before we wrap up? But it's perhaps the single most obvious discussion question, and we have not talked about it. So we get a title drop that is great. The narrator says, so Sortilege in the scene says, inherent vice in a maritime insurance policy is anything you can't avoid. Eggs break, chocolate melts, glass shatters, and Doc wondered what it meant when applied to ex-old ladies. The title is in the movie, but I don't think it just refers to that scene. I think it's, everyone involved. But yeah, tell me what you think of the title.
If you take it at the definition that you just gave us, it's that all of this was sort of inevitable. All of this was going to happen, was damage that was very, very likely natural to the state of things. And I think that even goes to your point of the politics at the time, the things that are brewing behind the scenes, where it's like we're kind of reaching this boiling point in American culture, and yet it now, I think, retroactively feels sort of inevitable. Yeah, I think that's my general take of it. And as far as Shasta, if she is an inherent vice, then maybe it's inevitable that he was drawn to her so much that they end up kind of getting back together at the end.
Or it's inevitable that they'll break up, right?
Or it's inevitable that they'll break up. Yeah, because how does it apply to ex-old ladies? That if it failed once, then history tells us, logic tells us that chocolate will melt and they'll break up again. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's still it's this like faux answer almost that you think it's telling you like what the ending is, but it's still leaving it in this like ambiguous, foggy kind of state. Did you have a different take, or do you just agree with me?
No, I think that's fair. I think it also does just directly refer to Doc. I've been talking about how he's inherently this bygone era. People keep telling him to like wash his feet, for example, because he's so hippie that he won't even wear shoes, which it wasn't all hippies at the time at all. He's going around barefoot and having the dirtiest feet. We see them one time. It's disgusting.
And they're all patchy, like he's got big old calluses and like missing skin. It's horrifying.
Yeah, and he's got the mutton chops. I mean, he's committed, he's absolutely staying with this era, whether it's there or not. And I think people take him, less seriously for that when we see that. So I think in a way that is, a titular inherent vice. It's, if he's going to be this way, then he's not going to ever reach his potential or, move up in, not that you can get promoted when you're a private investigator, it's just you, but he's not going to get bigger parts. He's not going to be taken seriously, but because this is who he's chosen to be.
And I think kind of on that note, this is another one in PTA's repertoire that is sort of a morality play type feel for me, where it's got all these themes of excess and sloth and greed in the case of Wolfman. Yeah, I love how much I'm really picking up on that watching these films back to back to back. How often it seems like there's a real moral point of view, at least.
Yeah.
For him.
Yeah, by the end of this run, I feel like we'll have a pretty solid grasp on, if we don't already, on PTA's worldview. I mean, last week we talked about, where he draws the line at value of faith, and, we're starting to see kind of, and granted, we're seeing a bit of Pynchon here too, inherently. I mean, we are seeing, what PTA values and what he thinks is worth fighting for, is worth letting go. We see that with Boogie Nights, with Magnolia, with Punch Drunk Love. I mean, maybe all of them, as I'm thinking about it. And yeah, where you need to draw the line in the things that you're going to be a part of.
Well, I feel that I've maybe already shown my hand a little bit.
Okay.
So I'll ask you first.
Wow.
Would you recommend this film?
Yes. Asterisk. You have to be. I think you have to be pretty into film, or at least like art, for this one. I don't, when we talked about There Will Be Blood, for example, we're like, this is gripping, regardless of whether you're into the performances, regardless of whatever. When we talked about Punch Drunk Love, like at its core, there's a rom-com there. And I guess at its core, there's a noir here of some sort. But yeah, if you're a plot viewer, this thing's probably gonna suck. Like, honestly. But if you're willing to really sit with it, really question the things it's questioning, have a discussion with a friend about what's going on here and why the choices are made the way they are and everything, I think this is super rewarding, and much more so than if we had recorded this years ago than I would have said. I think it's easy to dismiss this film due to how much it says doesn't matter. I think it's easy to walk away from it feeling like nothing matters, but I don't think it's saying that at all. I think it's saying, there are these things worth thinking about and talking about and deciding for yourself, even if the world's going to move on. Yeah, I was much more impressed this time than last time I viewed it.
I think I'm in the same camp as you. It really depends is my answer. Dang, if it this is not the one I would start with if you're just checking out PTA for the first time. And yeah, this is for experienced users only. I would say, because it's not particularly accessible at all. But if you're willing to do the work, and if you like a movie that confuses you and makes you think and makes you question things, then definitely give it a watch.
Yeah. If you agree, disagree, if you figured out why there's so many references to horror elements in this film, please write to us. We have email, retrospectivecinema@gmail.com. On Letterboxd, I'm at Ryan Loves Film.
And I'm at Annie Morell. We've also got an Instagram and a TikTok. Instagram's more where you're going to find our weekly posts about our new episodes. TikTok's more about short little reviews of current films coming out from the two of us. Both of those handles are retro_cin, CIN. So give us a follow there.
Next week, we have probably the film I'm most excited to revisit in this whole marathon. I saw it in 2017 in theaters and have not seen it since, and I loved it at the time. We have Phantom Thread. We also are kind of at the point in the marathon, we've posted on Instagram about it, but we're starting to think about our next director. So if you have someone that you'd love to hear us commit to for, a number of episodes, please let us know on something. And no guarantees. I mean, if you pick John Ford in his 128 films, I'll probably say no, but yeah, let us know who you want to hear. But yeah, we'll take it. Until next time, happy watching.
Yay. Woohoo.